Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
The Bet with the Best podcast is sponsored by AmWager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Speed, power, and ease of use are at the core of AmWager. The platform is packed with features including live video, race replays, conditional wagering, and true odds, a predictive estimate of the off odds that will give you an edge. AmWager gives players the information and tools they need to quickly make anything from a win bet to a complex structured group of pick 5 tickets using the ABC strategy. With a rating of over 4.5 stars on Google, AmWager is a favorite among horse players. Sign up now at amwager.com to take advantage of the simplest sign-up bonus in the business, a 100% first deposit match up to $150. If you want to bet with the best, then you need an edge. You need AmWager.
Welcome to episode 55 of the Bet with the Best podcast. This is a reprise of part 2 of a 2-part podcast. Rejoining us again is BCBC champ and author of the book, A Better Way of Thinking, Matt Miller, to continue our discussion about betting on the Breeders' Cup and, in particular, playing in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Welcome back, Matt. I want to pick up our conversation where we left off, and I appreciate you hanging in there for part 2.
Happy to. Production meeting in the middle of the show. I've just been standing here for a minute waiting for Chris to break parts 1 and 2, but it's the same conversation. So I didn't really earn my right to come back for part 2. I think this was going to happen no matter what.
No, you had to earn your way, Matt, and you did. You're being great so far, and so I want to continue it. And what I'd like to maybe talk about now, you've hinted at it, but you haven't really talked about what's you've talked about in general kind of strategy and approach, and you gave some examples, but like you're heading into the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge at Del Mar, which happens to be the location of in which you actually won the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. So you'll have some fond memories heading in. Again, congratulations on that big effort.
Thank you.
And so, like, what's your strategy going to be going? I mean, not like who you're going to bet and which exact races, but kind of like you talked about working back from the last race. Typically, what do you think your plan will be for attacking the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge in a month or so?
Yeah, and I don't have this written down, but it's going to probably sound like I'm reading off of a bullet point list because I've got it down to that. I mean, I've got my process. I know how I do these things now. Not that I'm done learning or anything like that, but through trial and error, you learn what works and doesn't. My BCBC will start probably with listening to some podcasts a little earlier than the draw. There's just so much content to take in, and I don't have the time after the draw to focus like that. I do have focus issues in general, and so picking up podcasts and taking some notes here and there, especially on the Euros, I'll do that. But once the draw comes out, I tune out all the noise. I do my own handicapping. A lot of that has been visual over the course of the year as I think like a lot of horse players, while I go to the races and enjoy them for what they are, there is a little bit of reconnaissance work I feel like I'm doing for the Breeders' Cup at the end of the year. I think we all kind of think that way. You see someone and think to yourself, oh, maybe in a few months, this could be the one. Well, okay, now you're looking at it on the page against the main competitors, international or national. And I do my handicapping. I then recognizing, bringing in this book concept that we talked about, recognizing, and I haven't used these words yet, that I'm a B- handicapper in my opinion, which I don't think is bad. I mean, I think a C is average. I think I'm a little better than average, but I know A and A- handicappers, and I want to go listen to their opinions on these races. I'm going to feel great when they affirm what I already thought. I'm going to really question when they say something different than what I thought. But I'm going to be, maybe the final picks. It's not necessarily a formal process, but the marination that goes on in my head, I'd say by the time I step off the airplane, I know who I'm betting in the Classic, if that's the last race. And if it's not, I can answer that question that I can see someone asking. No, I don't care if the Classic is the last race. I don't care if it's a maiden claimer. The last race almost must be won in order to win this tournament. It doesn't matter what it is. Last year, I think it was the sprint. It's the same strategies. It's the same betting. It's just different horses in a different division. Yes, it's less dramatic and it's less fun. And it's a shame that they couldn't figure out a way to get the timing of all the sports in the world to work out perfectly, that we can get the top moment at the top time. But okay, I don't know how the timing is going to work this year, but either way, it's a big bet on the end is the point. But I'm going to know who that is, and I'm going to know who the horses are that I'm hoping to bet on. I'm committing to nothing in advance, because any good bettor would tell you, you got to see what the odds look like before you can possibly commit. But okay, I've got my loose set of plays. I've got an approach when it comes to the minimums. Just for listeners for a second, $600, 3 times on day 1. I think it's 6 times on day 2. I can't always remember that. 5 or 6 or 7 minimums. I can't remember. But the point is,
so can I interrupt just for a second, Matt? Sorry, just
sure,
because some of the listeners may not be as familiar with the rules as others. So in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, kind of explain the minimums a little bit more so people understand what we're talking about.
These are a means of forcing the action. And it's not nefarious or bad, but tournaments, to get the players playing, set up rules that say, okay, people, you got to get moving. This isn't an instruction manual on how to play the tournament, right? To be clear, no one could possibly win the BCBC by just betting the minimums and seeing what their total is at the end. They are simply a guide, a forced guide for forcing you to start playing. So out of the championship races on Friday, and again, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but maybe there's 6 of them or 5 of them. I think they make you play 3 of them for $600 a piece minimum. You can do more, but it's a minimum, and that's per entry. So each of your 2 entries, if you have 2 entries, on day 1, you have to do your 3 minimums. This, by the way, if you look at the leaderboard after day 1, is why so many people are at $5,700. They've lost 3 $600 minimums. There is some sentiment that the way the race order has evolved is that having 2-year-old Fridays makes Friday almost a non-event to some of these tournament players, because no one wants to bet their tournament lives on what they perceive to be riskier 2-year-olds. But regardless, 3 minimums Friday. I think it's 5 or 6 or 7 on Saturday. Those minimums, to me, it's critical to talk about how I think of them. They are beyond an irritant. They are a hole at the bottom of the bucket of water that needs to be made irrelevant as soon as possible. $600 out of $7,500. Thankfully, I'm sitting here with a calculator and I'm friends with a math teacher, so I better get it right. Of course, I multiplied and then divided.
Howard's going to be unhappy with
8%. Sorry, Howard. So 8% of your initial bankroll is that first minimum, if I just did good or bad math. That's a lot. $600 out of $7,500. And if you lose that, the next one is $600 out of $6,900. That's 1 out of 13. Okay, we're still close to 7%, whatever, 8, 9%. The point is, that's a meaningful percentage that's getting taken away from your bankroll when you think about it in terms of, gosh, if I had that money 2 races later, I could have bet it on my winner. So instead of having those two $1,200, the two $600 minimums for $1,200, not only do I not have the $1,200 because I lost it, but I didn't get to bet the $1,200 on the 3-to-1 shot that I liked. So this really cost me $4,800. Right. This gets dramatic in my opinion. And one of my goals in these tournaments is to deploy my money before the minimums chew me up. The Breeders' Cup is tough for that because of this craziness with the 2-year-olds on Friday. And so as much, my preference, if you had jumbled the races randomly, my preference would be to find an early spot to make a good push so that the percentage that the minimums represent of my total bankroll are meaningless. Once you hit for something for 20 grand, you don't care about a $600 minimum here or there. Yeah, sure, you want to hit the bet, but that's not crippling you in the same way it is when you go from 5,700 to 51 to. And by the way, just like in poker, as you're watching your stack dwindle, any skilled poker player will tell you, you cannot let the stack get too low. You will be incapable of mounting a comeback if you let your 7,500 get down to $500 or whatever it is. So at some point, and I don't know where that magic point is for me, maybe it's at $3,000, $4,000. It's just a shove. I mean, it's just, I can't let these minimums keep chewing up this large a percentage of my bankroll, forcing me to play races that aren't my top races, right? For my top races, I'm shoving large sums of money. And I don't want to be wasting opportunity for that by, pitter pattering around with these minimums. So for me, ideally, if I could talk to the racing gods and get this Breeders' Cup set up the way I'd want, I would love to find a spot on Friday that I'm highly confident in. I would absolutely look to make a large push there for this, obviously to make money, but also for the purpose of rendering irrelevant the damage that these minimums do over time. And so, I can't state it strongly enough. It doesn't feel like that big a deal. $600 here, $600 there. But by the time your $7,500 is in the 3s or 4s, you've got a serious problem, and you probably need to act before it gets to that point. So that's the approach on the minimums. But
can I just follow up for a second?
Sure.
So, I mean, for you, the ideal thing would be to have easy go or Sunday silence in the first race, right?
First race.
You could shove in both entries. You won't have to worry about one of your entries about any minimums, and the other one, the minimums won't matter because you'll have built your bankroll up to the point where it's trivial. Does that sum it up?
It does, and I realize the example you just gave would never happen. But if it did, that might be the one time that I would bet both entries the same and bet the other in cash, saying, look, if I really, at the start of this tournament, feel that I have a lockup spot that is so certain, the idea of getting even money on one of those two horses on both entries, right, I'd probably just haul off and bet $30K on the other one on the side, saying, okay, either I make $10,000 on the weekend or I'm in spectacular shape in this tournament right away. Yes, that would be absolutely ideal, would be to have essentially, if you can interpret a race such that it looks like a match race between two horses that are 1 or 2 to 1, that would be a fantastic way to start things out and to deploy those two entries.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So you're talking about how you minimize the impact of those.
Yep.
The required minimum bets, and there are 7 on day 2. By the way, it's quite a bit actually.
It's quite a bit, and again, if you're doing well, it doesn't matter. You just have to pay attention. But if you're, and I'm not being critical of the rules, but it almost doesn't matter how many minimums there are on Saturday, because the balances that you need to build to, the $600 becomes so irrelevant so quickly. Once you're at 20, 30, 40 grand, It's when you're at the low dollar numbers that they can really hurt. And I don't think people are necessarily respectful enough of the damage they're doing to themselves. These aren't simple $600 bets. These are meaningful chunks of your bankroll, and you got to do something about it before you've just been taxed. It's just a tax that you're paying for time, and I'd rather find a spot earlier. So, okay, that's a nice little segue. So the trick then is spot picking. And I am trying to essentially balance risk, reward, value, strike rate, all sorts of different concepts that horse players play with. Strangely, value is probably lowest on that list in the context of a tournament. It's the biggest difference for me between playing in cash and playing in a tournament. A cash player not betting horses for value is destined for gambling bankruptcy, period. I mean, you absolutely must get appropriate prices for the odds the chances you're taking, the odds you're getting. In the context of a tournament, it's only a certain number of races, and it affects everybody equally. And you can sit there saying, next go should be 4-1. And, I have enough money to bet him to win the whole tournament, but I really don't like 3-1. And so I'm going to bet someone else because I think his odds aren't right. No, that's not how this works. When you're in a tournament, you just need to win, and you can worry about your ROI bullshit later. You just need to win. And so if the price you're getting on your horse isn't enough to win, this is what happened to Brad Anderson, talked about in the book in 2019. He got to the last race with a $20-something thousand total, wanting to bet on McKinsey. McKinsey wouldn't have allowed him to get to his target. So he switched horses. He simply said, this isn't going to get me to where I'm trying to go. And so I need to pick a different one that will get me there. I mean, maybe that's a great little moment to just pause on for people that are wondering what kind of guts this takes. I don't know many people capable of doing that, right? We all sit there watching the preps, listening to the podcast, reading on the airplane, talking to your buddies. You've got your classic pick for weeks, if not longer. And I just watched Brad 20 minutes before the last race just switch, right? That's who you're competing against. People that are playing to win. If he was playing to be right, he would have bet McKinsey still. He probably would have screwed around with Exactas. The whole thing would have gone south. But he was playing to win, and it's a completely different mentality. Yes, it's nice when you can play the horses you like, but there's also times where I find myself in tournaments playing horses I don't even like. I needed them. I mean, I'll give an example again from that 21 Breeders' Cup. I liked Echo Zulu quite a bit. I bet some daily doubles into the next race, but that next race was a mess to me, and I didn't like it at all. I just felt like I needed to get better value out of Echo Zulu than I was getting out of the win pool. So I went to the double pool, and I bet a couple of $600 doubles. So Echo Zulu wins. When I get to that next race, I'm looking at this race. It's the race that was won by Pizza Bianca. I wasn't in love with anyone. I think the favorite was something like 5-1. I tend to gravitate to chalk. I mean, that one wasn't that attractive to me. And I said, well, I have two horses in this race that I'm going to cash $20,000 daily doubles. This race is brutal to me. I should probably pick a couple different ones and do a couple other minimums here. And so I think I took Haughty and Pizza Bianca just because I thought the odds looked good and I was getting paid what I wanted. I didn't even really like them. It didn't matter. It was the spot. It's what the spot required. And it would have been a very bad move to leave myself with just two horses in that wide open race saying, I don't like this spot or I don't like the race. I didn't like the race, but as it turned out, it was a critical spot. And I needed to deploy those next two $600 minimums to take more full advantage of the spot. And luckily, my fourth pick in the race hit. 9-1 was terrific. The aforementioned Corniche, maybe that was part one. Sorry, listeners. Corniche wins the next race, and next thing you know, I'm at 20-something thousand in this tournament. But again, in that example, I picked horses I didn't even like. It was just the situation required me to go deeper. And so that's hard for horse players. A horse player that picks McKinsey for weeks and switches to Vino Rosso at the last second, there's a lot of people that just sit there saying, I can't do that, especially for this kind of money. This is crazy, right? And they're conflating issues. The money is a completely separate matter. If you couldn't afford to be there, you couldn't afford to be there. But once you're there, play right, play optimally, play aggressively, play to get to your goal. If you can't, you don't belong, at least in the way that you are presently there. Get an investor, get a partner, find a lower value tournament, although that's really tough to tell someone in the context of the Breeders' Cup, which is just the most incredible experience. But you have to find your way to get to a place of comfort. You've heard me say it a number of times. Maybe it sounds like I'm trying to convince myself. Maybe I am. But a $33,000 bet on Knicks Go, again, I got to just keep telling myself this, was only a $10,000 entry. That's what that cost. I understand I could have left early and taken that, but that was never in the cards. And if you can't mentally get to a place where you can think of it this way, this is hard. And so, not surprisingly, people who have read this book have wanted to talk about it. Strangely, it's the mental aspects of it more than, it's not a handicapping book. I do a little bit towards helping people to find those spots, those lockup spots, especially by using daily doubles and the power of those. We can talk about that later if you want. But it's for me, as I look at this 2-day extravaganza, I'm looking at, the 2-year-old races on Friday. I'm looking at this wealth of opportunity on Saturday. And I'm looking at this saying, I got to find, hopefully 3 reliable winners here. And one of them has to be the last race no matter what. And I've got a dollar amount in mind that I think is going to win this tournament. I am ready to pivot off of that in a heartbeat. If I see something on the leaderboard that makes me think that won't be good enough, most years that does not happen. People tend to not move too early because you're just putting a new target on yourself and the crazies will come firing for you. So again, that last race being critical, but I've got a dollar amount that I'm going for. And then it's just a question over the 2 days of what are the 3 or 4 spots that I picked? Was I able to find one where that second entry was really helpful? Right. It's funny. I mean, it's a really nerdy way to talk about it, but someone calling me on Friday night saying, how did the first day of the tournament go? Right. My really nerdy answer would be, I succeeded in not losing my minimums and I succeeded in finding a lockup spot. Right. It wouldn't sound like the way someone would describe a normal day at the racetrack. It's all about capital preservation and advancing towards targets. And, the horses obviously are critical to it, but on some level, they're almost beside the point. They're numbers, they are odds, and they offer multiple paths to get to that final total. The trick is to find the one for you that comports with your personality, that's hopefully the most reward for the least risk. Hopefully you're finding high strike rate opportunities rather than once in a lifetimers. I don't want to sound pompous in saying this. One of the reasons that I wouldn't take a 25-1 shot that I loved and just bet the whole thing, well, we talked about it before. I think I can do better than that. And I don't want to, the strike rate on a 25-1 shot, even when you're really smart and you've gotten tremendous value and the odds are twice as good as what you're getting, I'd still say at best, you're only going to win the BCBC every 15 years. That's not good enough for me. I want a chance this year, and I want better, and I want better than just a one crazy long shot. And yet, my guess is, as listeners are listening to this, the idea of that one crazy long shot doesn't sound that crazy. Again, you find some. Maybe your tournament comes down to 2 races. You find one long shot and you play the last race. I don't know. I could picture some people saying, I'm pretty good at finding 10-1 shots. And if I can find, I got 2 chances at it, you're telling me, with 2 entries. Okay. I mean, that's definitely an approach. For me, I think I can do better as I find lower price horses with higher strike rate opportunities, but to each their own. And really, there's very little judgment passed by me, if any, in this book about the handicapping side of things. There's so many different ways people attack this stuff, that I don't really begrudge anyone how they land on their horses. There's a lot of subjectivity to it. I just tend to get a little bit more judgmental or frustrated or wanting to help when I hear about the way they then want to turn around and bet those horses or play them in the context of a tournament. And these are 2 entirely different disciplines. This book, it's not just for tournaments. It's also for cash betting. It also covers sports betting and other stuff. But this book gets into a lot more of the how-to, the specifics of what do I do once I have those picks. And that, to me, really is what this tournament is all about. The horses come, the horses go. But as I look at my record over the last bunch of years, it's the method that has been so wildly successful. I'm not sure it's been the handicapping, and it's evidenced by the guys that I've invested in, Brad and Drew, that basically took this method with their own diverse picks. I love. I think I even talk about it in the book. It's a form of diversification. I don't think it's helping me at all to invest in someone and then tell them, here's what I think are good picks. Well, you should just go bet those on your own. Let someone take a good aggressive method and apply it to their own judgment and their own picks. And right, it's been a bit of a crazy run, but you've seen what's happened in the last few years. I'm thrilled I got one on my own. But with this style of aggression, with this way of looking at minimums and targets, both Brad and Drew were able to navigate these waters all the same. Right. And yet in between those other years, I think we've all crashed and burned fully and came in tied for last. I mean, so it's all good or all bad.
So let me talk a little bit more about the value and the decision making at the end, because you gave 2 examples. And I think the first one were like, say, let's keep it all with the Knicks Go example. It's 3-1. You were hoping for 4-1, and it's 3-1, and so you can't win the contest if you play him all in to win. So then you would pivot to some other bet. Either you might play an exacta with him on top, which you didn't mention, but it seems like you've been focused primarily on wins and doubles, or you go with another horse. I think everyone kind of understands that if your target is to win, and you can't possibly win with the horse you wanted to play, you got to do something different. So that part, I think everyone. Assuming they accept the premise that you're in it to win it, that makes perfect sense. But I think the part I think we could talk a little bit more about is the example where you do go, it's 3-1 on Knicks Go. You'd say fair odds on him would be 4-1 was your example. So if you were betting this on an everyday bet, you'd say, I'm going to pass because long term, if I bet him 3-1 and he's only going to win 1 out of 4, I'm going to lose money over a while. So you pass on that. But in the contest, if he wins at 3-1 and you think that gives you enough to win the contest, not only are you cashing your bet, but you're getting the prize pool. So the value, the ROI is a different equation than it is on everyday betting. So I think, that the value, you have to factor that into your value equation. And if you do it that way, it's still a good value bet, right? It's not a bad
very
bet.
Much. It's a terrific example, and I'm going to use round numbers. I think I'm pretty close with these. The year I finished with Knicks Go, I think I finished at around $150,000. And I think the total final payout for everything was either 4 or 450. And so, right, that prize pool portion comes in, and that pretty quickly wiped away any concerns I had about the value of Knicks Go, being 0.1 or 0.2 higher than I thought it should have been or shouldn't have been. Right, you're right. I mean, that prize pool comes in and infuses so much equity into the situation that it becomes wildly worth it. And again, I don't want to come down on people or sound like I'm being negative, but if people with balances of 10, 12, 15 grand, these tournaments are crazy to me. You look at the final totals at the end and you see how many people finished with those dollar amounts. I'm not telling anyone how to spend their money or where to save their money or how to not be responsible. I mean, I please be responsible. But my God, you get to a tournament like that, you've got $10,000 in the last race. You got a chance to cash 450 grand, and to come home with the 10 grand. I'm sorry, that 10 grand in that moment, in that tournament, is worth more than 10 grand. You have a positive expectation if you make a good pick. I mean, that prize pool is massive, and it's not, I mean, yes, there's a drop off. Second place is huge, but go down to seventh. It's still, you're looking at, 40, 50 grand, big numbers like that again, obliterate the little variances in the odds that are disappointing. It's not that big a deal. But yes, Chris, I agree. When you're playing cash, using this example of 3-1 and 4-1, I suppose before passing, I'd look at the double pool going into the race and see if I feel like I'm getting a price I like there. I would look at the exactas and see, well, for the horses I think have a good chance for second, I would look for some other angles to try to, before just giving up and saying this isn't the odds I want. But right, there are absolutely times that I'll just pass. The Breeders' Cup Classic is unfortunately not an option. You're not going to win that tournament without winning that final race. And so you got to find something. And whether you think you're getting good value or not, I would argue that the definition of value changes completely in the context of a tournament with a prize pool compared to just a regular pari-mutuel bet.
Absolutely. So it sounds like your strategy, though, is win and double. Those are the two wagers that you focus on. Is that fair to say, or am I oversimplifying things?
Very fair to say. I try to keep it simple. And I recognize the point of this conversation is mostly on the BCBC. I do want to just talk for a second. You go to an investing presentation where they talk about your investing pyramid, and your safe investments are on the bottom of the pyramid: cash, bonds, government bonds, whatever. And the bottom of the pyramid obviously represents where the most of the volume is of the structure. So it should have most of your money. And as you ascend the pyramid, you can take slightly more risk. So maybe it's preferred stocks, then common stocks. Then it's the company your brother wants to take public, maybe at the tippy top of the pyramid. I look at that pyramid in the betting context, and I'm going to pivot to sports for a second and say, I think that sports bettors have this pyramid completely upside down, inverted, and wrong. People are pounding away, and there's an application here to multi-race bets and horse racing. People are pounding away with the majority of their bankroll, or a disproportionate portion of their bankroll, on higher risk bets, where in reality, you need to start at the bottom of your pyramid, in my opinion, and the bottom of the pyramid is win bets. The next level up is probably exactas or doubles. The reason I like doubles in particular is that they give you a second look at your horse. You play the first half of the double, and at that point, you've either hit or you missed. If you've hit, you have a hedgeable interest in the will pay you're about to collect. you can look at that amount and say, you're leaving yourself all sorts of opportunity for new information to come in and for you to do something different. And so the race finishes up. I'll just be really snarky and say all the late betting comes in. All the betting that everyone thinks is done after the race goes off. And sure enough, after you've bet your double, whether it's a computer player, whoever the heck it is, someone after the race is over, you're looking at the probables and say the will pays and saying, oh my gosh, someone actually pounded this long shot into submission in the doubles. Well, right. I'm not making that observation in isolation and then just going on with my popcorn. I'm looking at that saying, wait a second. Someone at the last second pounded this horse by betting a ton of money on it. I don't feel that good anymore about my horse. What the heck with this other horse? You at least have an opportunity to see that. And there are plenty of times, whether it's in a tournament or in cash, I'll use a simple, I'll be alive to a $2,500 will pay on a double. I will take the entire $2,500 before collecting it and bet it on the horse that got suspicious money instead. I completely flipped the script, and now I'm actually rooting against the horse that I'm going to break even if the horse I initially liked won, but I've got this additional information on this other horse based on this late money that's making me feel better about changing my pick. That's a very dramatic example, but in the context of the Breeders' Cup, and it's actually interesting. I don't know why it comes to mind instantly. Haughty is one of those horses that got really, freaky money. I think it was bet all the way down to 6-1, despite maybe one or two career starts. It was strange money. It was odd. I mean, we all kind of looked at that saying, why is this horse getting bet like this? Well, right. That's why I made it one of my two $600 doubles. I just figured, well, yeah, I didn't have interest in that horse before the double, but when I saw what the probables were, when I saw how the horse was getting bet, by betting a double, I got a second chance to pick up information on the race. And it's a chance to either bet more or to pivot to somebody else or, whatever you want to do. So I do like doubles for that reason. It starts, first of all, in the Breeders' Cup, you can't do anything longer than that with pick threes or pick fours. But for me, win bets and doubles tend to be, both in tournaments and in cash play, my primary play. I will do exactas, even in tournaments, especially, and I'll pick on Ways and Means again from this last weekend. If my recollection is correct, I think there were only two horses in my mind that had a chance for second. And so I did play a win bet, but in addition to my win bet, I just pounded away at those two exactas. And when you take the amount that I bet collectively on the exactas, if you pretended I bet it to win, I got an overlay in the exacta pool by cashing more money having bet the exactas than I would have made if I had bet to win. And so, finding a lockup spot, it doesn't have to be with two consecutive winners. It could be, the flight line can't lose. I mean, how amazing would this have been if you got to the flight line Breeders' Cup Classic race with a balance on two entries? You would have looked at frankly, you probably still would have lost because I'm not sure you would have had Olympiad in second, but you probably would have fired off huge on Taba and Epicenter. That might have been a very good approach, but it's interesting though, for those that want to be critical of the win bets, I think I just outlined exactly why I prefer win bets to exactas. You do take a bunch of chances or additional chances with exactas. And with the win bet, you just need one thing to happen. And there's not a lot of glory in betting a horse at 0.5-1. There's also not a lot of glory in picking one of three exactas because that's all you can afford and knowing it was one of the other two that got you. So for me, I try to keep it as simple as possible. Taking that kind of risk on exactas makes me crazy, and I try to avoid it if I can. But if I truly believe it's a lockup spot, I don't mind pivoting to that. But you are right. It's the simple wagers. It's win bets primarily. It's doubles. That's it.
So here's an idea, just kind of following up on your two entries, using the second entry as kind of the fullback. What about if you had a strong opinion in a race and you wanted to play that horse to win, but maybe you thought there were maybe another horse that you're worried about beating you, or maybe even two, playing in the exactas with those over your horse on your second entry? Is that something you would ever do or consider doing?
Absolutely love it. Yes. To me, it's essentially the same as my Life is Good example with making those two other win bets. If you're willing to commit to your horse and say, look, I lose my Breeders' Cup if this horse doesn't get first or second or third. Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal way to do it, because and again, I don't want to make assumptions about who you pick or whatnot, but especially if the horses you can play in the exactas over your horse are longer prices, you're going to get paid. And so if you can do it within a race, there's an interesting concept so the one thing if your horse has lost is that someone else this is so simple, but it's so obvious. Someone else in the race beat your horse. Would you rather try to pick a winner from the next race or from the limited pool of horses that are left after the one that beat yours? And if you really love your horse, I love the idea of, maybe it's a full push win bet or double, and maybe the other entry is just two massive exactas with that horse to come in second under the two other logicals or something like that. And right, if you're just wrong and your horse doesn't show up on the day, if your personality can't handle your entire tournament falling apart in one race, I don't recommend this. If you can't, especially if it's late in the tournament, it's a fantastic, where you have to take chances and whatnot. It's a phenomenal idea. Yeah. Frankly,
so
as you're saying that, it's amazing as you're saying that. I really wish I did that in 21. I mean, I love Life is Good. And frankly, until this conversation, the idea of using the second entry to play $4,000 exactas with Life is Good on top of Ginobili, that would have been an unbelievable move. But yet, as I look at that example, Life is Good was 3-5, and I'm not sure I wanted to commit to him coming in second if he didn't win. I mean, that to me is the key question. Is you have a selection, and I tell you, things didn't work out. Your horse didn't win. The question is, what is your level of confidence that it still did well? And for a horse like Nick's Go, that's an interesting. I might have said, look, if the horse doesn't win, I don't know where the heck he's going to be. I mean, he probably folded. He probably chickened out when someone else looked him in the eye, and he probably fell to last. I don't know, just because I love the horse, that it means he comes in second if he loses. Sometimes you take a speed horse hoping they don't get burned out, and if they get burned out, you don't know where they finish. So that's an argument against this exacta strategy to some extent, but I don't know. If you're looking at a closer that might just be a little far back and you don't know if he can get there, maybe that's a better example of a horse where you would have more confidence that, I don't know if he's going to win, but he should be up there. Yeah, it's a terrific idea, Chris.
Yeah, it would all depend on what your opinion of the race is, right? If you think it's a win or out, finish off the board kind of horse, you don't want to be playing anywhere but on top, right? But if you think
Correct.
It's a kind of reliable horse that has a good chance to win, but there's a couple other horses that might, if it doesn't get the trip, or they might just be a little bit better, so it all depends on your evaluation of the race. But it seems like the kind of strategy you're employing, that might be another way to kind of use that second entry, kind of leverage it in, and the race where you have a high opinion, you're ready to kind of shove all in to back yourself up.
Yes. And the alternative would be, okay, take the other horse to win and look at the doubles going into or out of that horse. So where's your higher level of confidence? Is your level of confidence that your original pick is going to get second, or that you can pick the winner in the prior race or succeeding race? Yeah, I don't know. It's a real good tool to keep in the toolbox. That's a nice idea.
Yeah, it's just another option depending on what your opinion is about that the race that you have the strong opinion on. You might have more than one opinion. It might be more than just that horse, and maybe you can take advantage of that with the 2 entries. So another question, it sounds like your strategy is I'm going to shove all in on that last race to hit my target, and I'm going to figure out what the target bankroll needs to be to get me in that position to make that last play. Is there a reason why? What if there's 2 or 3 races you love before that last race that can get you to your target? Is there any reason not to just play it that way? Is there a reason why you need to wait to that last race? And then you could always play something else, if you like it in the last race, but you might have, be able to get there before you get to that last race. It just seems a little strange that you're starting from that last race, where it may turn out that last race is a race you don't have any opinion on, So I'm just curious about that.
The tournament that I learned the most from was when Brad won in 2019, and Dick Girardi put up an unbelievable number in the turf with a great exacta. I think he had bricks and mortar over, God, it was 50 to 1. The horse paid tremendous. It was a Peter Erden horse. It was a great pick. And he jumped up to like 137 grand. And Brad and I, who had been talking, I forget during the tournament, for years before the tournament about, what does it take to win this? We've always talked about 125 grand being about the number. And right, Dick puts up a number of 137. It's like, well, shit. there goes that. And yet after that initial disappointment, it took 2 seconds to say, let's adjust the target. That's it. I shouldn't even make that a plural. Brad said, got to adjust the target. I'm still playing to win, right? I'm not just going to give away first to that guy because he happened to get to my number. Right. And so all you're doing is causing the people behind you to aim their arrows a little higher as they fire into the army ahead of them, right? They're just going to hope the thing goes a little further. They're going to take a little more risk to get a little more reward. You very, very seldom see people in meaningful tournaments back into a win. Maybe if Arkang won, whatever year that was, at 100 and something to 1, that's probably a year someone would have backed into a win. I'm going to guess nobody hit that one. But otherwise, these things are won with aggression. They are not won by hoping everyone else failed. You kind of have to take the steering wheel and control your own fate. And if you can achieve your goal of hitting your number, that's all you can do. And if someone else snaps you, that's fine. They're not going to snap me ahead of the last race. Right? I'm just changing what I'm doing. Is there a number that I wouldn't chase? I had a hilarious dinner one night with Christian Elmers and Tony Joe talking about the fact that these totals seem to be getting higher and higher. And if someone put up a big number, is there a number that I wouldn't chase in the final race? And as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking it would have to feel impossible, right? If I had 70 grand and someone else put up 400, yeah, I'm going for it. I'm firing the 70 grand looking for 401. And I know that would be the highest total by like 200 grand. I don't care. It's the Breeders' Cup. It's 10 grand. It's, it's a one time a year event that in my view is prepaid. It's a $10,000 entry. Don't get caught up in the dollars as you're playing. And if you're focused on winning, right. And if someone puts up a higher total than you were expecting, than I'm expecting, I suppose if the number was $1 million, I would just look and say it's impossible, and I give up. I tip my hat to you, and I'm just going to fight like hell for second this year. But other than that, I see almost no point, and I don't mean it as a rude statement against other players. I don't even look at the leaderboard all day. If I take a peek, it's to see if Howard or Marshall or a friend is doing well. Yeah, I mean, I hope my buddies are doing well, but no part of me cares at all who the people are on the board and what dollar numbers they have, as long as those numbers are lower than my target. The only exception to what I'm saying is that there are certain people, and I'll pick on Marshall, who's a dear friend, that just scare the shit out of me. And seeing that guy with money is a problem. That's not meant to disrespect other people who I know are very good. But yeah, I admit there are a few names that I'll see. And I would imagine my own name is one of those, that when you see me towards the top, there's kind of just this, oh shit moment of, well, I know that guy's firing. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to do something to win this thing. I mean, that is a strategy of mine. That is not accidental. That is a reputation I have manicured intentionally. I'm trying to make this hard for people. I don't want it to be easy. And I want people to know you're going to have to go nuts at the end to win this thing. The one exception I can think of, I'll tip my hat to Sean Borman, who somehow managed to do this with art and grace and not risk his entire bankroll at the end. I'm not trying to be rude to him. I couldn't have more respect for him or what he did. I don't think that's the likely winning strategy year after year after year. I do think more raw, naked aggression is required. But man, I mean, what he pulled off, he got to his total without having to put all that at risk. Frankly, it's far more impressive than what I did, in my opinion. It's just not a strategy I want to embrace because I think it's harder than what I'm doing.
So let me ask you a hypothetical question. Let's say you could be the guy with 70,000 going in the last race, or the guy with 200,000, or let's say whatever your target, 150,000. Would you rather be the guy with 150,000 or the guy with 70,000?
Well, obviously, I'd rather be the guy with 150, but I feel badly for the room when they see what happened at the end, because the reality is, if 150, I'm not stopping, right? I'm a target. I'm a sitting duck at that point. And so if really you just hypothesized the leaderboard of me entering the last race with 150 and the next guy at 70, my new target is, I don't know, 205. And I'm probably pushing all in to get there with some really safe stuff. Right. I want people to look at this and say, oh my gosh, I can't do that. This is too hard. That's real money. Right. There is a huge advantage to being able to do this with house money, or to be able to maintain the mindset that this is just a game, right? Both of those work. You don't need to have won this before to have that mindset. Win your entry, buy your entry, whatever it is, make sure you can afford it, make sure you're comfortable, and then go play. And you're playing a game. And just, it's crazy to me that you don't see this kind of second guessing in virtually any other kind of game. And it's the fact that this has off ramps. I mean, I can only imagine what the world of poker would look like if in the middle of the World Series of Poker, someone could convert their chips into real money. You'd have people bailing at all different points of the tournament. Someone wins one hand and they're probably done. Yeah, poker doesn't let you off the hook. You got to finish it out. And I'm not letting people off the hook. You got to finish it out.
But you make a good point, though, that I think makes, the players in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, to me, it's more impressive when they're making these all-in shoves in the World Series of Poker, because those chips are monopoly money in that they don't represent real cash. You can't cash it out. In the Breeders' Cup, it's real money you're betting. So when Drew puts 97,000 down, it's not like fake chips. It's really $97,000 he could walk away with instead of betting. And there's a big difference, I think.
Huge difference. And then the question, and in the moment is not the time to ask yourself this question. You need to ask yourself this question 2 weeks before you play, because in the moment, who the heck knows what kind of emotion overtakes you with $97,000. So the question has to be, how committed am I? But I don't want to, again, this is all about preparation. I don't want to get to a set of circumstances where I'm trying to decide what my priorities and values are. That should all be worked out well in advance. This should all be about execution and just finding the best way to do it. And if you're soul searching and worried about what other people are going to say, or worried about your family, or saying this is too much money, again, I'll pick on Drew. It's a great example. Drew, if you couldn't bet that 97 grand, what were you doing there? What were you doing? Your whole point was to go do that. And so if you get to the point where you're able to and then chicken out, right, it's not the end of the world. You made 97 grand, but you wasted your $2,500, although in that case, you still would have gotten a whole bunch out of the prize pool. But I just look at the person who gets gun shy at the end, and without trying to be rude, saying, like, what were you thinking 2 weeks ago? What did you think this was going to feel like? Didn't you expect it was going to be hard to push? Did you not think at all that you were going to work your butt off to get from $7,500 to 41 grand, and how hard it was going to be in one push at the end to shove 41? Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people that don't think about that, or even worse, in the moment, just hit the panic button and take the money, and that's fine. Again, be responsible and all that, but I think you'd be in such a better spot if you knew what you were going to do in advance. You just don't have to think about it. I think a lot of people make themselves crazy, and I also can't imagine the regrets people walk away with. And this is, we talked about my origin story in a prior interview, but it was a regret that actually lit this fire for me, that I didn't do what I wanted to do. I didn't do what I thought was the right thing to do. I didn't make the right play. And I just said, I'm not doing that again. And thankfully, the circumstances worked out such that I could afford to act on that. And I'm not oblivious to that point. It is house money at this point. It's an important thing to say from a responsibility standpoint. Before winning the Breeders' Cup, I had one huge year and came home and got my wife to agree, put that money to the side and you can play with that and I won't bother you. And it changed my entire life, because I was playing so out of fear and so, not wanting to be judged. Not that I was hiding anything or whatnot, but I just had all these extraneous factors that were influencing the way I was playing. And once you gave me a big sum of money and said, I don't care what you do with this, just don't come back for more. Wow, did life get easier. Playing without fear, knowing your limits, knowing the size of your bankroll, these things all helped quite a bit. But you don't need to win the Breeders' Cup to be in that position. You can simply budget for that, or, win your seat, or, whatever it is. But once you're in it, you need that same mindset. Whether you want a whole bunch of money to get there or whatever it is, once you're on the battlefield, you can't keep, this isn't Avatar where you're going back and forth between the world on Pandora and the world in your pod. You're in one. You can't keep going back to check on your feelings in the other world. You just have to stick to Pandora and do the best you can.
So could you maybe, just to kind of show how this unfolded in the year that you won, that culminated in the Knicks Go Bet, just show how kind of simple it was, in hindsight anyway, for you to get to that point? How did you get from 7,500 to your to what you needed to play on Knicks Go? What exactly were the bets you made?
And I'll even be emotive in the way I tell it, because it is so simple. It's head scratching. I had one opinion on day one. It was Jack Christopher. He got scratched. That opinion turned into Corniche. That's the only, and I like Echo Zulu, those are the only two horses I really liked the entire first day. I started the day, I think I mentioned earlier, with two $600 doubles on my two entries going out of Echo Zulu into a chaos race. And in the chaos race, Echo Zulu wins. This is terrific. I'm alive to 20 grand or so on two entries, and say, well, this race is crazy. I didn't like it that much. So I'll do two more $600 doubles into Corniche. That was in the next race. And so I dug deeper into the odds, and okay, I found 9-1 Pizza Bianca. It was my fourth choice in the race. And now I'm alive to a 20-something thousand dollar double with Corniche, who goes off at, I think it was a little bit above even money, maybe 6-5, wires the field easily. And just like that, I'm sitting here with 20-something thousand bucks on one entry, and I think 5,700 on the other. I think the other one lost 3 minimums. It's like, holy shit. How did that happen again? Your fourth pick in a race you didn't even care about hit, but it was sandwiched between two horses that you did care about. So, right, I was able to just patch together a $600 minimum bet, daily double, that paid 20-something thousand bucks. I go into the second day, and I recognize this sounds crazy, like I knew what was going to happen. Well, it's not that I knew what was going to happen. I had an expectation. My expectation was that Nick's Go was going to win at 3-1. And so I knew I wanted 33 grand to bet on the last race, right? I just 33 grand times 3 plus your 33 grand. I wanted a target of 130 something. I don't remember the exact number, 125 something. Again, which would have been adjusted if someone had done something in between. But entering day two, I had hit one daily double the day before. I come up to the Life is Good race, and I said, this one's good. I put 24 grand to win on the horse. He wins. I'm sitting at a balance of 35 grand. Look at my buddy and say, I'm done. He said, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm done. I'm locked and loaded. I'll just do these $600 minimums till the end. As it worked out, I had one final chance. I know this term is offensive. I had a little extra money. I wanted 33 grand to bet on Nick's Go, and I had 2 or 3 grand extra. So in the second to last race, I did a double with Walton Street into Nick's Go that would have paid 135 grand, figuring, okay, cool. If that hits, I'll bet the 33 grand on a different horse. And now I got 2 horses in the last race. Well, Walton Street wasn't great. That's fine. The bottom line is I hit one winner that day. It was Life is Good. Big deal, 3-5. And I hit the last race, Nick's Go, for 3-1. And right, just doing the math, a $600 double that paid 20 grand, bet to win on a 3-5 shot, bet to win on a 3-1 shot. That's it. And it wasn't as risky as it sounded, because in the Life is Good race, I was covered with those 2 other horses. So that even minimized the risk even further. Right, I agree. And I'm not saying this to show off. I sit here scratching my head saying, this is supposed to be harder than this to win this. This thing is so revered and so difficult. And you're telling me that's what you did? Yeah. Win bets, doubles. I mean, it was 1 double and 2 win bets. And one of them was way less than even money. So, right, it just goes to show that I'm not trying to say this is the way to do it. I'm saying there's lots of ways to do it. And lots of those paths, you can use some really heavy chalk. It's okay. You don't need to find 20-1 bombs, at over 10-1 second choices and crush $180 exactas. I mean, there are people that do that. That you don't have to do it that way. And I do think the problem for some of those people is if that's the way they play, great that they hit something early, but what's your strike rate on those kind of plays? And are you going to be able to do it again? Because I'm going to make you. And it's not just me. I don't want to talk pompously. I don't know. I'm going to make up a number. There's probably 30 people out there, in my opinion, 30 in this field of 400 that are exactly like me when it comes to you should be scared. They're aggressive. They've got good strategy. They're willing to do what it takes. I'm not disrespecting the other 400. They just may not have had the experience or done this as often or thought it through as much. Many of those people still go on to win these things and do very well. So again, there's no disrespect, but the number of people that are basically there to make sure that this is going to be hard is a pretty large number. And you can count on this being hard. I'd love it to be me this year that makes it hard on people. I could be busted out pretty early on day 2 for all I know, but the one thing I do know is, especially, and I'd like to think a better way of thinking has something to do with this, the landscape does seem to be changing, right? The totals required to do well in these things seem to be getting higher. I do think people are upping their game, and that's fine. The one thing I'll say, there's a very logical question I've been asked by some people, why do you give away your strategies? Why do you explain all this stuff? My answer is really easy. I don't think I've ever lost one of these tournaments to another person. And I know that's sounds really stupid, but let me explain. I think every time I've lost to myself. It's not like I've ever just been nipped by somebody or I just wasn't good enough that day. It's either I have my day or I don't, but it's not that someone else had a better one. That would suggest a failure in strategy or in target setting or in something like that. As I look at whether it's the BCBC or any other tournament, full respect to all the other good players out there, but by far the one I'm afraid of the most is myself. It's me. I'm the one that's going to take myself down to 0 before my other big play. And so that's the hard part to me. It's also the part that makes these events so fun, because once you've blown yourself up, it's just really easy to root for everybody else. There's really not a lot of cases out there where people are narrowly edging each other in some sort of a brilliant strategic move where now someone should be sore about it. People tend to be in control of their own fate most of the time.
All right. I think you've answered my questions. Is there anything else from your book or about betting on the Breeders' Cup or the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge? Anything else that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
It's a great experience. Breeders' Cup in particular, to get an opportunity to go to the annual Olympics is unbelievable. Have fun. That's really the other advice I have is the tournament's going to go the way it's going to go. Your strategies, your handicapping, it's going to work or not. It's very unlikely you're going to walk away sore that somebody else got you. It's going to be you that, I should have picked this instead. But these are great races. The venues are generally fantastic, and past races and just go enjoy them. You don't certainly, this is not the venue to play every race. These races are tough. It's fun to just watch big races and go in the paddock and check out the horses up close and, all this other stuff. So the event, I can't state it enough. This one is so special because it's not just the tournament. It's the tournament plus. I love these tournaments on regular weekends, don't get me wrong. But, for people that haven't done this kind of thing, I'd at least, if your budget can afford it, or if you got friends that collectively you can afford it, I'd highly recommend the experience. It's a terrific time. But at the same time, right, whether it's my book or, listening to this podcast or whatever, I would just tell people, get as much information as you can about how it's going to be. Just maybe go a day early, get the lay of the land. Just be prepared. Understand what totals are required. You don't want to be solving this kind of stuff on the fly. And again, when you go into it with that approach, it's a lot of fun and it's not that stressful, and it's a chance to see good friends. So I can't wait for it, and that includes you. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, always look forward to the Breeders' Cup. Even and again, you don't even. I mean, I would recommend if you can at least once go to the Breeders' Cup because it's a great experience just to be there. It can be a little distracting from the contest, and you can also play from home, and people have won the contest from home. So don't let that be a deterrent either. If you don't want to travel, you don't like to travel, you'd rather focus, stay focused at home. You can play the contest that way as well. And like you said, there's contests on a weekly basis that at a lesser scale that they can participate in. If you haven't got involved in the contest world, hopefully listening to Matt talk about it might get you excited about giving it a try. And there's a lot of smaller contests you can get started in. And like Matt said, you can even win your way into the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge and play with house money.
Absolutely.
Anything else
and
you want to add?
Yeah, those just another word on those smaller tournaments. Again, this isn't some big plug for the book. The strategies are virtually identical in the smaller tournaments. It gets a little different. The main difference I'll point out, the top-heavy nature of the BCBC prize structure really makes going for it about as compelling an opportunity as there is all year. So I would say for people playing in other tournaments, just give the prize structure a good look and make sure that if you're going to take a big risk on something, that you're getting paid for it. Some of these, I'll just give an example. This all ties together nicely. There are some tournaments at this time of year where the prize is a seat in the BCBC. And the tournament might pay the same prize to the top 5 people, in which case I wouldn't feel any particular need to win that tournament. 5th place is just as good as first. And so if first has some outrageous total, I don't see any reason to take the risk necessary to pass that person unless you think everyone's going to pass them. But the bottom line is pay attention to the prize structure, and not every tournament requires this level of aggression or this high of a target finishing spot. Just a word on that. I usually look at those as a multiple of the starting. So if we start with $7,500 in this tournament, I don't know, for a tournament like this, the multiple that typically wins might be 17.5 times. That number has gravitated up. But in tournaments that have a flatter structure, it might be 5 times. I mean, I think there was one this last weekend that was, I was thinking 4 times or whatever, and it was a big tournament. So you got to pay attention to the way the structure of the prizes work. But again, in the Breeders' Cup tournament, they definitely make it worth it for you to go for it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, my rule of thumb on most of the kind of the typical ones that aren't, you described a real flat structure where, the top 5 are the same. Most of them aren't quite that flat, but they're nothing like the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. And usually it takes maybe 10 times your starting bankroll to win, and somewhat less to finish maybe in the top 5 or something, which usually gets you some sort of a prize. But
yeah,
I use it as
it's often a
starting
surprise,
point.
Actually. People are often surprised. That Monmouth Pick Your Prize contest is a real good example. People very focused on the top, but you'd be absolutely shocked as to how low a multiple of your starting bankroll you need to still finish in the money there and to still get a prize. I mean, there's years where it's 2 times or 3 times. So yeah, it just pays to pay. Look, some of these places make it a little easier than others, but you can find the leaderboards from the past and just do the math and see what multiples. These patterns repeat very similarly year to year. And so, the Breeders' Cup, I think, also makes it pretty easy. There's a lot of information out there about what prior winning totals have been. But to your point, Chris, I think it's important to know what's been good enough for 15th. I mean, there's plenty of people that you're sitting there with $8,000 at the end saying, well, there's no way I'm going to turn this into 150. But I think if I can turn this into 40 grand, that'll get me another 30 of prize. Yeah, that's a great calculation. That's a very compelling proposition. So, just in general, being aware of historical totals necessary to achieve different spots on the prize board. That's a good tip.
Yeah, and that last example you gave is a good example of how value could be different in the tournament. I mean, you could maybe have a 2-to-1 shot that you could put your $8,000 in and get to 25,000, and maybe they get you into the prize pool, and so you're really getting, more than 2-to-1 on that horse. So, that you should, you can start getting tactical, and that's just for that contest. There's other contests where you can see a similar thing where you are in the odds board and what the prize structure is. You might be able to get some value and hit the prize pool with a bet that might look like it's an underlay if you were just betting cash. So it's always good to keep that in mind and factor that prize pool into your calculation.
Yes.
All right, anything else? I think we're about ready to wrap it up.
My crew and I will be out there this year in Del Mar, and especially on the heels of writing this book and the positive feedback I've gotten, it's an open invite to your listeners. Find me. I'd love to hear your reactions to this thing. I'd love to hear your own stories. I'd love to hear where you disagree with me or you think I'm being too aggressive. Chris, you've been very gentle in pushing back on a couple of spots, and I do actually really like that debate, and I don't think there are definite answers. So, yeah, this should be a terrific year. We'll see who's going to win and whatnot in the races. But as far as the tournament's concerned, yeah, stop me. I'd love to have a drink and shake hands and hear what you think about things. And that obviously goes
there you go.
For you, Chris.
Yeah, there's your invitation. Chat with Matt. And I'll say before we wrap up, I do recommend reading his book, especially if you plan on betting, participating in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. But even if you're not a contest player, there's a lot in there that's worth reading. We've covered some of the points, but he goes into a lot more detail, and we haven't covered everything. So I definitely recommend you give that a read. And I really thank you, Matt, for not only sharing, in this podcast and the previous Bet with the Best podcast, but also, with your book, sharing your knowledge with horse players. That's what this podcast is all about, really trying to help players improve, especially on the betting side of things. Like you said, many players, you hear that lament, I'm a good handicapper, I'm just not a very good bettor. Well, shame on you. You can get better. It's probably easier to get better betting than it is to get better at handicapping. Maybe not quite.
Totally. I mean, if I'm sitting here talking about a handicapping book right now, your listeners are like, oh my gosh, really? This guy thinks he's got the solution to picking every horse, and there's so many different things. Right. I completely agree with that statement. I know you're trying to wrap up, but you just got me all riled up again. It is so much harder to get better at the handicapping than the betting. And so, I mean, I think there's probably a golf analogy here that if you worked on anything, you should probably work on your putting, as counterintuitive as it sounds. But this is very similar to that.
Absolutely. You got to put the ball in the cup. The best drive in the world doesn't guarantee you anything. If you can't finish it, the job. And, the betting is converting your opinion into a profit. That's the betting side. And in a contest, it's converting that opinion into winning the contest, or at least cashing in the contest. But, I really do think that the betting piece is certainly just as important and probably more important. And it's not any harder. It really isn't. And in fact, you probably get more of an edge by becoming a better bettor because there's fewer of them out there, right? There's a lot of more good handicappers than there are smart bettors. That would be my,
Totally.
I can't prove that statement, but based on my experience over a long time playing this game and, knowing a lot of horse players, I think that's a pretty safe statement.
Yeah, I think that was Pete Fornatel's opening line to his intro to the book, where he says, it's something to the effect of there's so many more skilled handicappers than bettors. How do I know that? Right. I know that because I know all these people with great opinions that are all broke. And we've all been there. I mean, it's an unbelievably frustrating part of the game to get it right and not get what you think you deserve. And yeah, that's what I'm here trying to help with.
Well, you have been helpful. Hopefully, the listeners will agree. I'm sure they will. I appreciate it, and I also appreciate all the listeners. Again, I really have been overwhelmed with the support we've been getting with the Bet with the Best podcast. It's all thanks to the guests like Matt who are willing to share their opinion, and for you out there that are listening and giving us positive feedback. So once again, may all you out there boldly go where no horse player has gone before.